Number 10. Rose McGowan. The charmed actress's childhood was anything but magical. She was born in Florence, Italy, and her early life was really crazy. In 2011, she opened up to people about her family's involvement with the controversial polyamorous Children of God cult when she was a child. A free love hippie dream gone horribly wrong that still exists to this day as the Family International. The cult has been blighted by disturbing allegations since it was originally formed in 1968 by preacher David Brandt Berg. The group initially consisted of runaway hippies and was founded on the concepts of salvation, spiritual revolution, and happiness, and a total distrust of the outside world. Unfortunately, as most cults go, Rose and her family were caught up in their deep web of control. But she knew she wanted to get out from the cult from an early age. Quote, "I did not want to be like those women. They were basically just there to serve the men." It was only when her father learned that the cult's leaders planned to endorse encounters between children and adults that the family escaped in order to protect Rose, who was only 9 years old at the time. It's a miracle that they got out at all. Number 9. Janet Jackson. Keeping an entire marriage under the radar in Hollywood seems practically impossible, but somehow Janet Jackson pulled it off twice. Janet married singer-songwriter Renee Elizondo in 1991 and kept the union under wraps for almost 10 years until he filed for divorce in 2000. Then in 2012, she again managed to secretly marry Qatari billionaire Wissam Al-Mana, but waited a year to announce it. But her marriage to Renee was totally unknown to the public. The couple were a creative powerhouse together and married after a few years of dating, in a hidden ceremony in March of 1991. It was her decision to keep the marriage a secret, and she told Rolling Stone that she wanted to live a normal family life because since she was a child, her personal life had been lived in the public eye. According to Janet's Lifetime docuseries, Renee proposed to her on a beach during a rainstorm, which sounds really romantic, but their divorce was public and brutal. The singer ended up suing Janet for $25 million in spousal support, alleging that he'd signed a prenuptial agreement while under duress. The lawsuit dragged out for 3 full years, and Renee reportedly walked away with upwards of $10 million in 2003. Number 8. Ricky Martin. Back in 2000, there was an infamous interview that the star had with Barbara Walters, where she pushed him to speak on the rumors that had been circulating since the beginning of his career. In that interview, he is hesitant to respond after she says, quote, "You know, you could stop these rumors. You could say, as many artists have, yes, I am gay, or you could say, no, I'm not. Or you could leave it as you are, ambiguous." It was very apparent that Martin was not only taken back by the abrasive line of questions, but simply refused to answer, probably because the mainstream attitude towards queer people in the 2000s was infinitely more negative than it is today. Ricky was also a renowned Latin artist, and such an ambition may have very well alienated a large majority of his audience at the time. For about a decade after the interview, speculation about his sexual orientation was everywhere. Then in 2010, he shocked the world by posting on his website that he was, quote, "a fortunate homosexual man." It was a monumental moment in his career, and the star later said that becoming a father to his 2 twin sons prompted him to come out.
And at number 7, Coco Chanel. Coco Chanel is best known for creating one of the most recognizable luxury brand names ever. She was born in France in 1883. By the time she was 27, she owned a successful clothing store, and only 10 years later, she would release the little black dress and change the face of fashion forever. But while her brand was growing in the 1930s, France was taken over by Hitler's army, and many Parisians resisted the German invasion. But to the surprise of many, Coco was not one of those people, and she seemed to welcome the rules that the Germans were enforcing at the time. She even dated an SS soldier at one point, and although many say it meant nothing, there have been many rumors over the years that Coco was anti-Semitic. With one book called Sleeping with the Enemy, Coco Chanel's Secret War, the author alleges that Coco was actually a secret intelligence operative for the Germans. After the war, she fled to Switzerland, but she managed to come back to France later because she got funding from the wealthy Wertheimer family, who still control most of the company and do their best to avoid questions about Coco's relation to the Germans.
Number 6. Demi Lovato. In the the 2000s, she was one of the most up-and-coming Disney Channel stars ever, with the success of Camp Rock and various other shows that really launched her into the spotlight. Not to mention the fact that she was also a really good singer. But the way she coped with the stress and demands of superstardom was unfortunately turning to illicit substances. She managed to keep this all under wraps throughout her youth until her secret life was eventually exposed. In July of 2018, Demi suffered an overdose. She spent several days in the hospital before going into treatment later that summer. In August of that year, she told her Instagram followers, quote, "I have always been transparent about my journey with addiction. What I've learned is that illness is not something that disappears or just fades with time." Since then, her journey through the ups and downs of sobriety has helped many people, and she has since been able to speak a lot more openly about her addictions.
Halfway number 5, Amber Heard. If you watch I.O., then you definitely know about Amber Heard. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp were married in 2015 after meeting on the set of The Rum Diary. But only a year later, the couple had divorced, and Amber requested a restraining order against Depp, citing violence and physical abuse. Then an explosive TMZ video came out showing Depp throwing a wine bottle and glass at Heard. She also submitted pictures to the court showing bruises on her face. After all this was exposed, everyone took Amber's side, and Johnny was blacklisted from Hollywood. But the story wasn't over yet, and voice recordings were later leaked showing that Amber was actually abusive to Johnny on many occasions, and Heard had actually been accused of domestic violence many times in her past, while Johnny's ex-girlfriends came to his defense, saying that he had never hurt them. Right now, they're involved in a lengthy court case with Johnny suing Heard for defamation, and a lot more is coming out, including the fact that she in their bed, and I wish I was joking, but I sadly am not.
Number 4, Lance Armstrong. Some people have called this the biggest sports scandal in history. Lance Armstrong was the best pro cyclist at one point in time. The American won the sport's most prestigious event, the Tour de France, 7 consecutive times from 1999 to 2005. But he was holding in an explosive secret that would tarnish his reputation forever. In 2012, Armstrong denied that he ever relied on performance-enhancing substances, calling the allegations against him outlandish and heinous. But when the US anti-doping agency released compelling evidence, his web of lies started to crumble. He eventually admitted to Oprah Winfrey in 2013 that he did in fact cheat and stated that his mythic perfect story was one big lie. What's more, Armstrong insisted that he never even felt bad or felt it was wrong when he used the performance-enhancing substances. The whole thing remains one of the most dramatic sports interviews ever. He was subsequently stripped of his 7 Tour de France titles and bronze Olympic medal, and was forced to step down as chairman of Livestrong, and all of his achievements were gone in an instant.
And at number 3, Ellen DeGeneres. Ellen is one of the most beloved people ever, and before her huge scandal, she was one of the most well-known people on television. She was even nicknamed the Queen of Nice. But that all came crashing down in March of 2020, when Kevin T. Porter claimed that her niceness was all an act, and she was, quote, notoriously one of the meanest people alive. Then more people came out with their stories about Ellen, with one server saying she got fired because Ellen complained about her chipped nail polish. Then when the lockdowns happened, Ellen was one of the only shows that didn't pay her employees during the leave. Then tons of reports came out that Ellen's show had a toxic work environment, and top producers were accused of sexual conduct and racist behavior. She recently just came back on air, and time will tell if she can win back people's hearts. Based on the dislike ratings in her most recent Ellen 2 videos, it's not looking too good.
Number 2, Oscar de la Hoya. He is unquestionably one of the most successful American boxers in history. In addition to winning the gold medal at the 1992 Olympics, he won 10 world titles in 6 weight classes before retiring in 2009. But unbeknownst to his fans, Oscar de la Hoya was leading a secret life that eventually got exposed. In 2007, his pristine image took a severe blow when shocking photos revealed that he had a dark side. The New York Post published a story that included photos of De La Hoya with model Milana Dravnel, wearing full-body fishnet stockings, women's underwear, high heels, and boxing gloves. At the time, a panicked De La Hoya denied the photos were real, and it was later reported that he paid Dravenel a whopping $20 million to remain quiet. But it wasn't until a 2011 interview with Univision that the former Golden Boy admitted that he had in fact indulged in cross-dressing. Quote, "I'm tired of lying to people, lying to myself." So it turns out that it was real. Number 1, Matt Lauer. He was one of NBC's biggest stars for 2 decades, where he got the show top ratings as a star anchor. In fact, he was allegedly so valuable to the network that Peacock gave him a yearly salary of $25 million. But his stellar reputation and incredible achievements all came crashing down in 2017, when NBC received a detailed complaint from a colleague about inappropriate behavior, with reason to believe it may not have been an isolated incident. In the way that these allegations tend to snowball, many more of the victims came forward in the wake of the announcement, and several more disturbing allegations were brought against the longtime anchor. He was abruptly fired for the incident. One of his colleagues spoke about a time that Lauer brutally attacked her in a hotel room during the 2014 Winter Olympics in Russia. However, the former anchor denied any wrongdoing and, in a statement to Variety, called the encounter extramarital but consensual. Okay.
So starting off at number 10, we have Tiger Woods. So back in 2009, Tiger Woods was at the top of his game, and he held the title of best golfer in the world. He also had a beautiful family with 2 kids and a loving wife. But it all changed when the National Enquirer accused him of having an affair with a nightclub manager. This then led Tiger to crash his Escalade into a neighbor's tree at 2 a.m., and he was charged for reckless driving. This then led to rumors that Tiger's wife, Elin Nordegren, knew of the affair and was physically attacking him for it and smashing his car. After all this came out, it got worse for the family when countless women came forward with their stories of sleeping with Woods, making it clear that Tiger was cheating throughout their picture-perfect marriage. A few months later, in February 2010, Woods came on television and made a statement about all of it, admitting he was unfaithful to his wife and he was going to be treated for a sex addiction. But because of all this, his golfing took a huge hit, and some of his biggest sponsors pulled the plug on him. And at number 9, Caitlyn Jenner. Caitlyn Jenner was known for many things over the last few decades, with her being a successful Olympic athlete and then the lovable and relatable dad of the Kardashian family on Keeping Up. But during all those years, Caitlyn was holding in a huge secret, and that was the fact that she identified as a woman practically her whole life. The situation started when Kris Jenner divorced Caitlyn in 2014, with the tabloids rumoring that Caitlyn was transitioning. But after months of speculation, Caitlyn set the record straight in July of 2015, and in an interview with Diane Sawyer, confirming that she was a woman. There was also a special on Keeping Up, where Caitlyn told her family of her new identity, and we got to see the family react to the news. And after all these years, it's great to see that Caitlyn now can live as her true self, but unfortunately some of the things she has said about her transition has caused her former Kar Jenner family members to distance themselves. And at number 8, Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber rose to fame as a teen idol and a bubblegum pop sensation. But this wholesome reputation didn't last as Justin got older, and he was caught starting fights, egging houses, and getting arrested for a DUI. Because of all the negative things about him in the press, he was banned from several countries and would leave his concerts early if people were annoying him. This caused some of his fans to turn on him, with him getting a water bottle thrown at his head during one performance. But after a few years with a bad reputation, he decided to turn it around in 2017, and he canceled a tour in order to spend more time attending church and making himself a better person. And now he's very outspoken about his dedication to God and makes it a center point of his life. And now that he's married, he seems to be on a better path.
Number 7, Leighton Meester. Unlike the character she played on Gossip Girl, Blair Waldorf, Leighton Meester wasn't born with a silver spoon in her mouth. In fact, the disturbing truth of her early life was revealed when news of her family's misdeeds started to surface at the height of her success. The actress told Mary Claire that her family has a crazy history. Probably the craziest she's ever heard of, which is pretty accurate because Leighton was actually born in a Texas federal prison, while her mother was serving a 16-month sentence for smuggling. The actress told Cosmopolitan in 2009, quote, "My mom lived through a lot before I was born, and I can't judge her on that. She and my dad are good people. After she was born, her mother would go on to serve 3 more years in federal prison for trafficking illicit substances, while her father was also serving time. As a young child, she was sent to halfway houses before settling with her grandmother, who was also involved in the same smuggling ring as her parents. In fact, her auntie, who was also sentenced for similar similar charges, actually broke out of prison and became the first woman ever in the US Marshals 15 Most Wanted list. Talk about girl power. But it's important to note that Layden says that growing up in her family wasn't all that bad and that she attributes a lot of her success to their struggles.
And at number 6, Teresa Giudice. Teresa is best known for her messy antics on The Real Housewives of New Jersey. And it seemed that ever since she was featured on the show, she was doing everything possible to prove her and her husband were uber rich. But the cracks started to reveal themselves pretty fast. It started when the couple filed for bankruptcy. Then a few years later, Teresa and her husband Joe were sentenced to jail after pleading guilty to fraud charges in 2014. After pleading, Teresa ended up serving 11 months of the 15-month sentence and came out of jail $11 million in debt. But her husband had an even worse fate and was released to ICE, who later deported him back to Italy. And even worse, the couple ended up separating in 2019. And this is a classic case of what's called a duck, and that's someone who looks fine above water, but underneath their legs are kicking like crazy, and they're doing whatever they can to stay afloat and maintain that rich image.
Number 5, Michael J. Fox. Having starred in box office blockbusters and a long-running sitcom, Michael J. Fox was among the most promising stars of the 1980s. But despite all of his success and the fact that his career was on an upwards trajectory, in 1991 he was thrown a massive curveball. At just 29 years old, Fox was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease. Although he would not share the news with the public for another 7 years, fearing it would ruin his career. The diagnosis was difficult to accept because he was young and so healthy at the time. He even got 4 doctors' opinions before eventually accepting his fate. All the time, Fox kept his condition out of the spotlight. He was both suffering and learning about the disease while his acting career was greatly affected. Then, much to the world's shock, the actor decided to go public with the news in 1998 before eventually becoming a strong advocate for Parkinson's research and making an acting comeback. It was a secret that he kept in for such a long time. It must have been incredibly freeing when he was finally able to tell the world.
And at number 4, Matt Lauer. Matt Lauer was one of the biggest news personalities on NBC for 2 decades, and he rose through the ranks of the organization very quickly, with the network paying him $25 million a year. And near the end, he was so powerful at the company, he could practically do whatever he wanted, and he'd get away with it. But his days on top came to an end in 2017, when Lauer was abruptly fired after tons of sexual allegations were revealed. According to Ronan Farrow, it started with one employee complaining he forced himself on her in a hotel room during the 2014 Olympics. Then shortly after, 3 more women came out. As well, he's accused of treating women like objects and just being an all-around bad guy with a smooth-talking facade. Lauer claimed it was all consensual, but of course he was let go from the company and is now disgraced in the industry.
Number 3, Prince. One of the greatest guitarists of all time, Prince was a rock legend. Best known for songs like Purple Rain, Kiss, and When Doves Cry, he was always a very private individual and revealed very little about his personal life. Fans never would have guessed though that the brilliant musician was coping with a serious medical condition his entire life. But all that changed in one 2009 interview when he revealed to a talk show host that he had had seizures as a child and that his parents struggled to handle it. He went on the PBS show with Tavis Smiley and said, quote, "I've never spoken about this before, but I was born epileptic, and my mother and father didn't know what to do or how to handle it, but they did the best they could with what little they had." Though the seizures he endured as a child were painful, Prince said his condition was largely under control later in his life, thanks to divine intervention, and he also admitted that it was his faith that helped him cope.
And finally, number 1, Wendy Williams. Wendy Williams is known on television as the woman that spills the tea, and she's one of the most entertaining and shady hosts ever. And one of the things people love most about her is how honest she is with her fans, sharing most of the details of her personal life. But in 2017 is when things started happening. They made it clear there was more going on behind the scenes than we all knew. First, she fainted live on air in 2017, then took weeks off to rest, revealing later that she struggled with Graves' disease for years. Then in March of 2019, she made headlines when she revealed that she was sober after many years of being a functioning drug addict. Then only a few weeks later, it was revealed her and her husband were splitting after his mistress gave birth to a child, revealing later in an interview with Andy Cohen that she knew of her husband's infidelities for years, but she stayed because of her son.